Hello, friends and enemies, heroes and villains. Welcome to your very special community challenge, redeemed and now today completed. We have the Game Masters of Epic Realms on here. This is going to kind of double as a Game Masters Workshop because, well, let's just face it. I was thinking of doing a Game Masters Workshop with some people that are local anyhow, and so here we have it. It's like a double. It's like a double win-win as far as that's concerned. But you guys asked for it, and here it is. We have with us today. He did the Sandpoint campaign, multiple of the mythic one-offs that aren't one-offs for us in the real world. He also currently does the Stolen Souls campaign. You might know him as Matt, or in chat as Zine. Welcome, Matt, to the show.
Hello, everybody.
Right next to him, you guys might remember him from running the very long, very amazing campaign known as Curse of the Crimson Throne, which is one of the original campaigns from this stream that kind of kicked off role playing on this stream. Welcome, Andrew, aka Monkey Swag. Oh, yeah. And last but certainly least, I mean, not least, thank you for that middle finger, our good friend, the Blind GM. He has run D&D 5th edition games. He has just recently run some old school 3 for us, a whole campaign with myself and Brian and Matt as well. All right, here. So welcome the Blind GM, aka Adam, to the show. The GMs of Epic Realms.
Adam, do you need me to drive to your place and quick pull that knife out of your back before we continue, or are you good?
No. My cat's here. I'll have her take care of it.
That works. That works.
Nice.
And then she'll lick it closed for me. It's fine.
So you guys all have the collective theme is you all have run games here on stream. And Adam, I know you run RPGs on your stream as well from time to time, but how was it for you guys going? Because a lot of this kind of started right at the crux of the pandemic, where everything was locked down and we couldn't do things, and I kind of just started streaming right about that time as the plan was. How was it for you guys converting from meeting in person and tabletop, and then not only going online but going to a live stream sort of format? But I want to start with Andrew, because like the Curse of the Crimson Throne was a really huge ongoing campaign as far as scheduling and planning goes.
For me, it was easy. I had a foot already in the door in Roll20. I think I was already. I don't think I was pro, but I was considering upgrading to pro before the pandemic happened. I had one campaign that was completely on Roll20 already. And so it made sense to move to the online platform, and not having to commute to games is nice too. But the pandemic was when I really overextended with games, as you do if you're any of the GMs in this room.
And I don't know what you're talking about, Andrew.
And now I'll just twist that knife in your back, Adam. And now I am slowly ramping them down a little bit before I get bored and overextend again.
Matt, what about you?
Sense.
And thank you, Identity Crisis, for the lurk, and everybody who is lurking. There is also a drink refill redeem that is redeemable once an hour if you want us to drink. Some of us are participating, some of us are not, and that is our choice, and no hate to anyone who is not. Matt, go ahead.
So, yeah, looking at Roll20 or Foundry, or all the various ways to stream online, but something that I've been looking at, just because friends, in the northern part of the state, friends that have moved cross country, some family that are out on the East Coast that were looking at wanting to start gaming, but not really knowing how or what was the best way. And then, the pandemic hit, and Andrews is like, hey, you got to check out this Roll20. This is the way that I'm, playing games online, and made a free account. I think 2.5 hours later, I had filled up all of my storage that I could with my free account, and then upgraded to pro. I think now I'm sitting at like 1,400 hours of games run as a GM on Roll20 since the pandemic hit. I think the biggest thing, and Andrew and I talked about this as, you know, the first kind of wave of COVID was ending and it was starting to get like springtime, and Andrew and I were talking. He's like, "Are you going to get rid of Roll20 now that things are starting to look better?" And I'm like, you know, this was the first winter that I didn't have to cancel a game because of a snowstorm, because we just did it online. Even if it wasn't streamed, it
Right.
was still being able to get games done even when the weather was absolute rubbish. And so for me, you know, being in our wintry, can be very crappy state, having that as originally a backup plan, but now being able to use maps, being able to get things set and prepared ahead of time has been a huge time saver.
Drink refill has been claimed.
Good.
1 hour till you can redeem that again for us all.
I'm way ahead of you.
I know, I saw. That's okay. You're allowed.
It's been a long day.
Right?
I'm gonna just piggyback off of what Matt said, just adding to it. Like this year alone, this winter alone has proven that the option to go online is such a great alternative if you can't play in person, particularly in Minnesota, because we've been hit this spring. You know, because we're in full spring, technically speaking. It is currently 19 degrees outside. There's 1.5 feet of snow on the ground, and they're predicting more tonight.
Yeah. Yay, snowstorm in
It's
for
just
April Fool's Day.
April Fool's Day. But yeah, so like this year alone has proven that having the online option has been kind of a lifesaver for some of these games, because like in years past we would have just had to cancel and kind of suck it up, and games do suffer when you do have to cancel frequently. So
Yeah,
Well,
for sure.
and I think especially for you, Adam, I know you have a handful of people that aren't in the state. Like if there wasn't being able to game on Roll20 or Foundry or whatever system you're using, you just have games that would simply not happen. And I think,
Does not
Andrew,
exist.
you also have a couple of players for some of your games that are out of state that,
Mhm.
yeah, without having that, that is a tool, are people that wouldn't be able to hang out with in the same capacity that we
Yeah.
all kind of grown accustomed to.
Yeah. Yeah. I have one game where every player is in a different state and we've only ever communicated online. That game would not happen if it wasn't an online medium, and it's all new players. And then I have another group that, you know, one of the players is moved to a different state, and there's all sorts of different work schedules. Some people work overnights in that game, some people work weekends. So having the flexibility of being able to schedule it even when you just get off work, sit down at your computer and play a game, you know, it's not, well, I work that day, so I don't think I'll be able to play. It's just, well, instead of watching TV, I'll just play a game.
And hello, Bentley and Zal. Welcome on in. Bentley says having online games has opened the door to me getting back into D&D. I'm so happy that this is now an option. Teddy says
Hear,
online
hear.
games still let me run games for my friends after being forced to move close to 3 hours away from home.
Mm-hmm. I think another thing that has really helped with having a virtual tabletop is yesterday had some errands to run and got home late. And rather than having people waiting outside my house or, you know, sitting in my living room killing time, was able just to send everyone a text, go, hey, be 30 minutes late. Let's start at 7:30 and still get in, be able to run the game. And then also just a logistics standpoint, being able to run a game later. And I know, Andrew, you've talked about this a lot for various games, is having a game go until 10 or 10:30 and then not having a 30 to 45-minute trip, depending on traffic, to get back home. You can turn your computer off, brush your teeth, and be in bed in 10 minutes.
Yeah.
For sure.
And that sounds like yep, I'm an old person and I got to go take my prune juice before bed. But it's just
Look, when you
Being-
role play to 11:30 at night and you work at 5 a.m., not having to drive home that half an hour, 45 minutes is fucking clutch.
Mhm.
Like, it's amazing, and I love
Yeah.
it. So
And it helps to, I mean, we've all been in that thing where we're running a game. I mean, Stolen Souls, we had it 2 games ago where we finally came to the end baddie, and I'm like, does everybody want to run around just to get that first round of here's some of the bad to prepare everyone what's going to happen? And that helps to, I mean, doing it on stream helps to kind of have that cliffhanger. But as a GM, it helps the players be prepared. You're like, this is what you're going to face. Now you got 2 weeks or a month or whenever the schedule is to kind of get your ducks in a row, because this is going to be a tough fight and I don't want to kill you all.
Right. I mean, you do want to kill them all, but no, just kidding.
Unless it's Andrew and I just can't roll anything below a 15.
I still survived.
you did.
You did. You did. What
Two
about
plot armor later, but yes.
what about the conversion not only from going, in person to online, but going from in person private to putting it on the stream here, or for Adam putting it on his stream? How is that as far as personally trying to run it and trying to put it together, but knowing that there are going to be people watching and it might gather an audience? Was that a stressor, or like changing how you're going to plan it? It's like, okay, well, this might be a long, drawn out, boring section. How can I spice it up a bit? Did you guys ever think about that or worry about that? Matt, we'll start with you.
I think the biggest thing for me was it helped getting prepared, having all of the maps done, especially like when I pop in and help run Old School 3 or getting something set up for Sandpoint or Stolen Souls. I'll have a whole arc pre-done. I'll take 20 hours over a weekend, and then I'll have all of my games preset for me for the next month or 2 months, however long it takes to finish. So it helps me not procrastinate. Now, where things can get a little tough, if someone decides to go off the deep end at high levels and goes, oh, I got teleport, I'm going to run to this town and let's do something else. Well, at a certain point, you got to throw them back on that train and run those train tracks back to your dungeon. And I think that just it's harder to do when you are doing an online game.
Yeah.
I don't think I had
like
as big of an issue.
As opposed to an online game?
Yeah, as a stream game as opposed to an online game. I also think kind of lucking out of not feeling like I have to like put on makeup or make sure my hair looks exquisite, or I don't feel like I got to get very prepared to run a game.
Yeah.
But I know there are people that we game with that when they run a online game that is being streamed, they have to mentally prepare themselves. People that are more introverted have to really put themselves into that mindset to know I'm going to be out there for however many people to see live and to forever live on YouTube or Twitch replays.
Right. Yeah, for sure. What about you, Adam? Running on stream as and preparing for that, and the knowledge of like there's people watching.
Well, I'm gonna jump back real quick because I didn't get to actually answer the last question.
Oh, I thought you had. We'll go for it.
No, I mean I piggybacked off of Matt, but it'll be brief because it will lead into this.
Yeah.
Prior to the pandemic, I had a partner that lived far away, and if I wanted to include them in any of the games that I was playing, I had to do it online. I didn't have a choice, and so I was looking for alternatives. And then the pandemic happened, and I'm like, well, hell, I mean that gave me the drive to be like, okay, we're gonna figure this out. And we're going to figure it out in a way that is meaningful for everybody. And then I'm like, well, since we're doing it online anyway, why not just put it on the internet for everybody to see?
Right.
And in terms of that progression of logic was literally what was going through my head at the time. I'm like, we're doing this anyway. We might as well produce something that can be enjoyed by not just us, by not just the people at the table. And I knew there was a market for that because there's things out there like Critical Role and Dimension 20 and all of that stuff. And I never expected, still don't expect, to ever get as big as they do. But for me, the story is the thing. And if I can share a good story and somebody finds something meaningful in that, then I feel accomplished. Now, in terms of converting from an in-person format to a streamed, online game, at first I didn't really change much of anything. And then I realized that pacing was important. And as Matt, like going with what Matt said, some of the people that we play with, either who are local or even some of the people that I play with that are out of state, they're introverts, and being out there on the internet is they're consenting. They're not doing it because they don't want to, but
It's a scary
they
world.
do have to. It's a scary world out there, and they have to mentally prepare themselves. And so I began to really kind of hit upon what was important, to the players. And I realized very, very early on, it took me a while to adopt it, but I realized very early on that if the players are having fun, the viewers are having fun. And so it really became more about my players having a good time, telling a good story, having a moment, having their agency, more than the story that I was telling. And I still want to tell a good story, but I want the players to really, really have their moment in the sun as much as they can.
Yeah.
And that's I think the big difference. And that's what's changed me as a GM, doing streaming. And that absolutely has reflected in even our home games.
Yeah.
And I think Matt and Nick, you actually mentioned something about that to me off stream at one point. You're like, you've really changed the GM, and I really like the change
Yeah.
that I've seen. Because for me, like before, it was always about, here's the story I want to tell. I'm going to tell the story. You guys are just, pawns in that. Now, yeah, you may start as pawns, but you end up as kings and queens.
Yeah.
And
the players
that's
become the story as opposed to just
right.
being there for a story you want to tell.
Exactly. And that for me has made all of the difference. So that's my bit.
Gotcha. Andrew, what about you? Going from, and like I said, like obviously we did it for the Sandpoint game and stuff like that, but Crimson Throne just seemed to have a different feel to it and how it was created and presented. And then to go from that being in person, which a lot of people don't know what it was like before the stream started, to becoming a stream and one of the more popular RPGs we had here. How is that for you to convert? Was it, as far as the stream goes?
I guess before I answer that question, I would turn around and pose a question back to you. How did it feel going from one to another as a player, firsthand experience?
It's hard for me to say from firsthand experience because I was also running the stream. I constantly felt like I was letting you guys down. But let's be honest. I constantly was like, I'm trying to play this character, but I'm trying to run the stream. And sometimes I couldn't keep focus on both. And it really bothered me because I really loved the character and I really loved the story. And sorry, it's I didn't expect you to ask that, and I really didn't expect to answer that, but it really did bother me pretty deeply because I wanted to be part of the group a lot more, and sometimes I feel like I might have overstepped playing the character to try and make up for any lost time because I might have been distracted for 5 minutes running the stream, or I might have not heard something because somebody said something. So it was, I don't know. Sometimes I felt like I was the letdown, and I focused a little bit more on that than the game. But as far as the presentation goes, I think, it's kind of that and the Sandpoint game were the core of our first streamed RPGs. But whereas the Sandpoint game, I kind of had a generic RPG that I had designed that wasn't super detailed. Crimson Throne, I made a Crimson Throne themed everything, and I was really banking on how awesome it would be, and the story was awesome, and people at the end, the viewers seemed really, really to enjoy it. As far as the story goes and your storytelling style. And of course, for me, it was the first time really, other than Meetings and Masterminds, that I had been there for you GMing. In the long time we've all been role playing, you've always just been a player with us. So
I want to throw this out there real quick. I'll let you get into your thing. I still yet to have Andrew as a GM for more than a game. That needs to be fixed. That is all I'm going to say. Continue.
So moving from physical to online for me, I think it was a lot of work, but it was a different kind of work. A lot of the work that I did prior to online was kind of self-inflicted wounds that I caused on myself. I'd print these maps. You saw the Castle Scarwall map I printed. That thing was egregious. I wrote adventure logs up until I couldn't do it anymore. Just wrote detailed logs of all the games that we had.
Every meticulous interaction.
These essays. I had a calendar that I'd place things on. I'd create specific items for every town we went into, and some of that stayed and some of that was still there, but it was easier for me to now just pull a map up into Roll20, and suddenly I didn't have to do the long-handed documentation. I do that. I'm a technical writer, so I do that anyways, but the long-handed documentation I didn't have to do anymore. It's there in a video format, and it could say more than I ever could say writing for a whole day. And so that was really nice for me to be able to go back and look at some of that stuff and what happened, and capturing some of the strongest moments of the campaign, to be viewable again and again and again. I don't look at that stream as anybody's performance, letting anybody else down. When we started streaming Curse of the Crimson Throne, that campaign was in the later half of its story. It was high octane. It was very stressful. It was a ticking doomsday, where we would learn whether 5 years just go up of playing and work just go up in flame, and all these other campaigns that are going on feel the consequences of that, or you guys would go down in a multi-campaign setting, much like what Matt has, as heroes that other people will hear about. Online also allowed me to use additional tools that I wasn't able or didn't really leverage in person, using sound in different ways. Soundtracks for different phases of a boss fight, kind of borrowing from like a video game inspiration, or sounds heralding something that's coming, sounds that build tension in a way that you can't build just by saying it. I think when we had Arabella's father, there was sound that was added to that when we first revealed him, and it built the tension up.
Right.
So just the tools that are online, I think, have only enhanced my ability to storytell. And having a stage also of people
Thank you for the
watching.
follow, Capybara Dragon. Welcome on in.
Having a stage for people to watch is kind of nice too.
Yeah.
People enjoy what you're doing. It's encouraging for you to push forward more.
Chat says that sound definitely enhances the immersion for them.
Mm-hmm.
So I have a question for you, Nick.
Yeah.
With you having done Crimson Throne And how many players were there in the Crimson Throne game again? 6, 7?
A lot.
There were 5,
Five.
and then me as a GM.
So 6.
Okay.
Yeah.
So how, as like being someone, for anyone that's watching that's like, hey, I want to start streaming my game, knowing that they're also going to have to play a character, run all of the background computer stuff, was it being in a game where you were like one of 6 versus being one of 4? Like having, the difference between Dalibor and Maractus.
Right.
And it definitely, like, just from watching, I mean, when there was when there's only, 2 other players
Yeah. There's a lot
besides
less
the GM.
downtime.
Yeah. So how, I mean, did that kind of make it a little bit more difficult to try to keep everything running and going on track? Or
It's a little 50-50 because when there's more people, there's more factors that I have to track. So I have a little slider. I don't have everybody's sound individually markered because I can't separate your sound via Zoom. And something like a Discord is way too choppy and the quality's not always the best for audio in there either. So I was constantly, with more people, I had to constantly adjust my audio slider for Zoom because one person would be too loud, one person would be too quiet. So yeah, yes, with more people, I had more time to focus on the stream, but also with less people, I had less to have to worry about.
that makes sense.
So
And
like
now,
whenever you and your wife are both on, every time she talks, I have to jump the slider up because she's just way quieter because you're sharing a microphone. So I have to jump that
She's
slider up.
across the room too.
Yeah. So but generally the two of you aren't ever going to be talking at the same time. So that's, I can focus on that. And like Stolen Souls, I'm not usually part of the game, so I can focus on that. And that's, one of the things. And there's what, you and 6 other people in that one, in the Stolen Souls?
5 or 6, yeah.
Yeah. And then of course me as well, in the background. But so, I'm just constantly focusing on like the sound of that too, or adjusting like pictures. So if somebody does this on the stream, I adjust where they're at on the camera. Like I'm manually adjusting where everyone's located so that everyone's central. Their face are the best size I can possibly get for that. So I'm doing all of that. So yeah, more people means more work on the stream. Less people means there's less work, but also less time I get to pay attention to the stream too. So it balances out, I think.
And then the follow-up, because and you mentioned it, how for you, how much just, I guess, easier is it with Stolen Souls not playing a character? Like, I know, like I had you sit in for a couple just because I didn't want to run another NPC with
right. Well, and
fights coming up.
We discussed that ahead of time, that Stolen Souls, that I would pop in from time to time. I would periodically guest, whether I'm periodically guesting as a character from that world that's already established, or an NPC, or filling in for a cohort, or just running monsters. We've already established that is something that I would be doing as part of doing that. But for the times where I'm not being in there, it's really nice because not only can I run the stream and I can pay attention to that, and yes, it's sad because if I had $1 for every time somebody came in and asked me where the hell I was, and I have to explain to the chat that I'm running the stream while you guys are role playing, but it's been nice, and it also I do have a little extra. I have a little bit more time to work on things because sometimes I am not needed whatsoever. Sometimes the stream is just running smoothly and I'm just sitting there listening to the game. So it's times like that I'm like, I could do more with the stream and make it more produced, which is a thought that that I've been working on. And that would be like everybody having overlay set up for everybody individually so that I can cut from person talking to person talking to person talking during the stream. So that is a thought also for the Stolen Souls or other games where I'm not GMing or playing in them.
I think kind of in that same line, and I'm sure Andrew and Adam, you've kind of had the same thought, is being on stream and running as a GM. I don't think I'll ever have a GM character if I'm going to be running a stream game. There's so much going on, especially with getting into like the nitty-gritty of dynamic lighting and one-way mirrors and light sources and just trying to make sure everything comes up. Had Standpoint started on stream, I wouldn't have never made Talon. It just would have been easier to run all of the NPCs without having an additional, voice that I also have to keep track of. And from the nods, I'm assuming all of you are the same
Yeah.
way as
Well,
well.
So when I run on my channel, I'm also running the stream. So I'm not only GMing the game, typically speaking, I'm also running the stream on top of it. So having the added wrinkle of having a GMPC, it's just too much work. Genuinely, if I could hand the reins over to somebody else so I could just GM and somebody else would run my stream, I would absolutely do it. Just because it is very labor intensive on both ends of that, like both as a GM and as a producer. That I can't. It's hard for me to balance the two of them together.
And a blind producer, because
And a
that
blind
holds a whole
producer.
nother
Yeah.
factor to your stream.
Yes, it does. So yes, absolutely. I agree. Not having a GMPC in that particular instance. Now, if I can just show up to a game with a character and play the character, like I'll do my homework, I'll do my due diligence as that character. But like, if I don't have to run the game and run the stream at the same time, like I'm in.
What about coming over? Because you obviously we're talking. You have your own stream where you run your RPGs on your stream, and coming over here and going like, I don't have to run the stream, but I'm still on stream.
It's nice, but well, so when I ran Old School 3 with you guys, I've known you, Nick, and I've known you, Matt, and Brian for 15 years, maybe 20. I've lost track. I've known you guys forever. We've role played together forever. So like running for you guys is really fucking easy. It's so easy because and here's the thing, it's not that you're predictable. Because it's not that you're predictable, but like we've been friends for so long that those patterns that happen in our real lives and our whatever, we just fall into those patterns. And so when I GM, I can make a reference that I know everybody at the table is going to get because most of us were there when it happened.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And so coming over to your stream where I didn't have to produce the stream, and I knew the people at the table very, very well. It made GMing, like I really loved GMing Old School 3. And if you ever want me to come back to GM for you guys again, I will absolutely do it. But
sorry.
I say that I might have just shot myself in the foot.
Rachel
but
and I
yeah,
have
like
plenty of channel points to spend on it when we do.
yeah, my birthday stream was a if that's still up on your video on demand, go watch it. It was a riot.
And video
There's
on demand is something else I wanted to mention real quick. I really regret not realizing for the longest time that I could download a lot of these games. Otherwise, I would have been downloading all the Crimson Throne games. I would have downloaded a lot of the things. I haven't. I also because of those, I felt so upset that I was like, I'm not even going to bother. And now I'm like, man, I should have really started downloading the Stolen Souls games because we started that from scratch. And I might still start downloading them, go back and download them all, and try and find a place to store them just so we have them. Even if we don't have the first ones, because even knowing we came in Crimson Throne, 2/3 of the way in, I still would have liked to have those 2/3.
I record all of my games anyway. Like I just do it right on Streamlabs. I finally had to get an external hard drive to store it all because it was getting to a point where it was too much. But yeah, it's worth doing. And then you have them. Then you can do something with them. You can put them up on YouTube or whatever. It's yeah, it's cool.
Teddy Warholm suggests I could do a highlight of the entire stream and they'd always stay on the VODs. Oh, that's a good idea.
True.
That would save me a lot of storage space.
It would. It would, because as much as I love my external hard drive, it was not cheap.
Right.
On the note of GM PCs,
Mhm.
In the games that I've run, I had one campaign where I played a GM PC player character, and it was from like 4th or 5th level to 9th level, maybe 10th, and the game is 22nd level now. So
God.
I don't I it didn't last long. I didn't really care for it that much, and I will never do it again in live gaming or on stream.
Yeah, and I think that's like such a big or an interesting thing with our group is we have, I would say 90% of people we game with are willing to hop in and be the GM for a little arc or a couple series of games.
Yeah.
So especially like our mostly like live in person, our joint Galarian universe, being the GM but having a GM character, I think works well because I get enough time to play. And I think it also helps of playing someone that feels more like a support character.
Well, and I think
'Cause
if you're kind of referring, you're sort of referring. You had Talon, but you're also referring to like Devlin,
yeah,
and that's an exception because that didn't start out as you running a
correct.
campaign. That started out as all of us as friends playing in an organized society,
Mhm.
and all of us were players. Most of
Have
the
we
time.
ever hold on? Have we ever explained fully on the stream what the United Galarian game is? Has that ever been actually discussed?
I discussed it briefly yesterday of the kind of the origins of it overall, but not specifically the very beginning. Well, and I say the very beginning origins, but wasn't Sandpoint before you did that? Sandpoint started before you started doing the Shadow Lodge
Yeah.
thing. So the Joint Galarian game started with the Sandpoint campaign.
Well, technically, the Joint Galarian game started with the disparate numbers of us just randomly deciding to play in Pathfinder Society.
Yeah,
And then
but
Sandpoint was going on kind of at the same time. And then at some point, Matt said, okay, all of these worlds are the same world. And, for me, who wasn't in the Sandpoint game, it was like, Adam, you can take your character Mordock and you can pull it in here
right.
and
But
whatever.
we
And
were
that's
doing
kind of,
so they had Pathfinder Society where you have your characters, you follow the organized play that they run. While we were doing that, everybody was doing that. We were doing Sandpoint. It wasn't until after a while that Matt said, "Everybody rebuild your characters from Pathfinder because I want to run a story with them that will be separate from Pathfinder Society." And he placed them in the same world as Sandpoint. Correct me if I'm wrong, Matt, but is that not the order that it happened? I could be wrong.
Yeah, that's the order that happened.
Yeah.
I mean, so the kind of the other part of that, it was Adam started PFS, I think a year or two before the rest of us did, just because you were more into the con scene
Yeah, he
than
and I
any
were.
of us were.
I was going to cons and I was like, I need something to do and I like
Yeah.
Pathfinder, so here we go.
And I was doing
Mhm.
Con of the North because I introduced Adam to Con of the North, and I believe
You
Matt,
brought me
and then
into Con of the
eventually
North.
everyone else. And because of Con of the North, I started going to all the local shops doing the Pathfinder Society. I was like, guys, I know you guys talked about Society, but you should really try Society.
Yeah, that was
Yeah.
a hard sell for me doing 3.0 and 3.5. I don't even remember what their society version was called back in the day.
Yeah.
But man, that was cutthroat. Like seeing people getting ready to fight each other in gaming parking lots
Oh my
over who got
gosh.
like the magical weapon. Like absolutely dumb.
It was Living
Wow.
Greyhawk. It was Living Greyhawk.
That's what it was.
Yeah,
Living
Living
Greyhawk.
Greyhawk was the
Yep.
original one
It was-
for sure.
It was a nightmare for sure.
That sounds ridiculous.
Oh well, but think about it from the time frame that we're talking about here. We're talking about the late 90s, early 2000s. We're just out of the Satanic Panic. It is not a mainstream hobby at this point. They're all kind of the people on the fringes, for the most part. A lot of people don't have a lot of social graces at this point. So like everybody feels everything that their character is feeling. So if they don't get that one very specific magic item, they're going to throw down. And like that, and that's the time frame that you're coming out of for Living Greyhawk. So yeah, I can see why it would have been a hard sell for Matt going into PFS. Like, oh, is this what's going to happen? Am I going to have to like defend myself in the parking lot on the way to the goddamn car? You know? And thankfully, at least the group that's here in Minnesota, which is where most of us got our PFS stuff, like we haven't really had that issue. We've had some good GMs, we've had some bad GMs, we've had some good players, we've had some bad players. But by and large, I can say that at least from my perspective, my experience with PFS, at least in first edition, and the little bit that I've done in second edition, has been largely positive.
Matt, I'm just gonna say it's a good thing that you're adding whey protein to your oatmeal now. You'll be ready.
Andrew is coming for you.
You know, I want to say I'm going to re-announce for those of you that didn't get the announcement yesterday. I'm going to do it right now because we're talking about the Joint Galarian world, and I don't know if I know Matt mentioned he knew that I announced it yesterday. So I've been working on Biston's Pond, which is a adjacent city that was created by the Sandpoint campaign in the Joint Galarian world. The Joint Galarian was the Sandpoint campaign. The Shadow Lodge Plus game. I'm just going to say Shadow Lodge Plus because there's more than just that. There was also there's a game we call it the girls game. It's a bunch of people that were the significant others of a lot of us long-term experienced players that didn't really know how to role play. That was like, you know, we're going to get them all together and help them role play and have fun and just, you know, let the girls be girls and do their thing. And so they all got together. That game is in the same world. The new Stolen Souls campaign is in that world. There's a bunch of little onesie twosies. The Old School 3 campaign is in that world. Because they're all set kind of in a Marvel-esque universe. It's, you know, the Joint Galarian, Unified Galarian, overall Galarian world that's set in Pathfinder. What's going to happen is I've talked with Matt, and putting together the Biston's Pond. Nothing's really happening in the Biston's Pond area as far as all of the stories are concerned. I've moved the Old School 3 campaign to Ustalov because I had stories I wanted to run there for another campaign, and I'm running that with the Old School 3 after Matt runs his little story arc. And the other games aren't really in Biston's Pond, and so the community here, so amongst our friends and the community, there are going to be a series of one-offs that are going to take place in the Biston's Pond area on stream with some of our community members for the stream. And it's going to directly tie into some of the other campaigns, and some of the other players may make cameo appearances as their characters, or some of the other GMs, should they choose to, may make a cameo appearance and run a one-off game as well. So that is the announcement. That is why I've been focusing on stream and making the Biston's Pond map, because it is going to really matter. So those of you who are in here watching and that have been enjoying some of these games, and we've been talking about some of these games in this world, there's a chance you guys may get to play. I have a handful of people in mind to play in the first game or two, and yeah, I have lots of ideas, and I'm very excited for that. So that's the announcement that might have gotten missed yesterday.
Is that going to be on Wednesdays? Or are you going to do that on Thursdays?
It's going to be on Wednesdays. Yeah, it's going to be Wednesdays. It's going to fill in. It'll be like once a month on Wednesdays. I probably won't start it till June or July-ish. Sure. Just because there's so many other things going on, including some one-shots with the blind GM that take place in the aftermath of the Old School 3 campaign that he ran.
Well, and more importantly, I think it's in the aftermath of the game that I just ran off stream.
Yeah. That too.
Which is, you know, it's not relevant to our players, but it was a big deal.
It was
a big deal. You all took out a it was a very the Mummy 3 moment. It's like you've only taken out one Rune Lord. I've taken out one Rune Lord twice.
Yeah.
Let's get to some behind the scenes of some of the games. And if you guys in the chat were watching any of the streams and have questions for any of these guys about any of the games they've run, or any questions whatsoever, feel free to ask. Even if you are in here watching and you've been a player in those games and you really wanted to know, feel free to ask. Or if you guys Matt, Andrew, Adam have questions for each other about some of the games or running it. And I know some of you worked with each other, helping each other out run stuff. Feel free to ask.
Oh, regular Bon.
What'd you say? Regular what?
Are we talking about the actual coven of GMs now?
I think we can. I think we should, in fact. So I'll start us off, and you guys can jump in. So for the end of Crimson Throne, Andrew approached Matt and I, who neither of us were in the game. Andrew approached Matt and I, and he's like, "Hey, I've got these bad guys that I need to build, and I've already got a lot on my plate. Can you guys help us out or help me out?" And Matt and I are always down for whatever. Like, we're happy to help.
For killing us, yeah.
Yeah, for murdering the PCs. And so he's like, "Okay, can you build this? Can you build that?" And he kind of gave us assignments, and that was the.
Thank you, Onaris, for the follow. Welcome on in.
Welcome.
So that was the impetus of the Annis hag that you guys fought at the end of Crimson Throne. Her name was Regular Bon. And as a result, in games that Matt and Andrew, maybe you've introduced it too, but in games that we've continued to run, any Annis hag, their naming conventions are all some variety of the name Bon, Bon, just Bon. And so every Annis hag everywhere is some variety of the name Bon because of this random fucking thing that I decided to do at one point.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't even catch that.
Yeah, and so yeah, like that was a big factor. And so, like, for us, because we all know each other in person and we're all friends and everything like that, we have a couple of GM chats where we'll go in, and like, if one of us is struggling with something or just has questions or needs a sounding board, we'll jump into these chats and be like, "Hey, here's a thing, what do you guys think?" And people will weigh in, and the feedback is always helpful. Whether or not we use it is subjective, but like, the feedback is always helpful. So
Yeah,
I think one big thing, especially looking at the VTTs, is one of a big question is, hey, does anyone have a map of a temple in a jungle, or does anyone have a map of a sunken ship? And just being able to have access to people that are running games that have collections of maps, just to be able to help take some of that load off your shoulders.
yeah.
I have to say, we have gotten so particular and spoiled with our map. Nobody goes in with a little paint droplet and, well, this is a tree over here, and here's a log that's fallen across the trail, and these two lines recognize that's the trail, and then there's a scarecrow over here indicated by this oblong.
Yeah,
that's not happening anymore. People are going and finding the map where an artist drew a log that has fallen over a trail and a actually drawn scarecrow, and
or just get the bits and pieces and put them on each other and build the map out of the little dungeon tiles that they have for Roll20 or whatever.
Those dungeon tiles on Roll20 are freaking amazing, and I love them. I love them so much.
So, and like this is like a quick, like, kind of behind the scenes question for mostly for Andrew.
Okay.
For running, like, you did Crimson Throne and you had to find your own maps, kind of do all of that. How nice was it for finishing out your Rise of the Rune Lords to have access to the actually pre-done digital maps?
It was way less finicky than Crimson Throne. Crimson Throne was me ripping from the PDF, putting it in Paint, bringing it over to Roll20, and then manually adjusting everything. And Rune Lords, they did that for you. You zoom it up to size, you copy, paste, and then it just works.
Yeah,
so, especially with all those damn circular rooms. Damn circular rooms.
Circular rooms are a bane.
They're such a pain in the
Roll20.
ass. Well, anything in Roll20, any VTT that isn't just your normal, like, square or just what's the I'm not a math geometry guy.
Rhombus?
Is that? Yeah,
I mean, you're
basically,
not a
it's
visual
not on
guy in general.
well, yeah, which is weird because my actual like spatial relations is great. I just can't see shit. Anything that doesn't adhere specifically to a grid can be such a pain in the ass if it isn't specifically made by somebody who's making it for a VTT.
Right.
Which is why something like Dungeon Alchemist is so great, is that you can make your own thing and then throw it into a VTT, and it's just designed to slot
Be
in there.
perfect,
It's great.
Right.
Mhm.
For
Yeah,
sure.
one thing I would say if anybody watching is looking at starting a game, whether you're going to stream it or not, if whatever platform you're using, like especially if you're going to run one of the big like adventure paths or one of the big multi-book modules that might, bring you 5-10 levels, a lot of them you can purchase now. I've ran Rise of the Runelords 3 times now in various incarnations of it, and spending the $100 to buy it on Roll20 and having all of the maps done, all of the tokens laid out, all of the dynamic lighting done for me has made it plug and play. And I've used the maps in multiple games because they're done and set up and I don't have to think about them. And while some people might say, well, that's being a lazy GM. No, that's being an adult that has a full fucking time job and doesn't
I mean,
want to
GM,
spend.
you're not a professional GM who runs full time.
Even then,
Right,
that's still a full-time job.
It is. I am a professional GM. Now, granted, I don't run full
I'm
time.
looking at you right now. You might not be able to tell, but I'm looking
That's
at you.
right. I can't. Here's the thing. So it's not a full time gig for me. It's just a supplemental thing. It's a side hustle, which is fine. But even with that, like having that element taken off of my plate means that I can focus on things specifically for the players and for the viewers that will be so much more fun and engaging, that especially since I'm not having to worry about making the art look good. I'm not an artist. I'm legally fucking blind. So having artwork done and being like sending it to Matt or Nick or Andrew and being like, hey, does this look okay for what I'm looking for? And having them go, yep, looks great. It's wonderful. It's amazing.
Right.
So I do have to step away for just a second. I'll be right back.
Okay. Matt, when you were running Sandpoint, did it turn out the way you were thinking from the beginning, especially when its streaming came along? Or did
So
stuff have to
originally-
start? Did you have to start changing stuff on the fly because things changed or because the stream changed?
No, so the big thing that changed for me going from in person to into being online was like a big thing for me is always kind of I want to give players their agency. I want to be able to go, I want the players to be able to go, well, we want to do this because this seems fun. But now as the GM doing things online, I have to give you that option at the end of the stream. So this way I can plan for it. I can't start a stream going, well, what do you guys want to do today? And someone's like, oh, I want to go to Absalom. Oh, I want to go to Carmago. Oh, I got a plane shift scroll, so we're going to go to Axis. Well, I want to have maps. I want to know what's in those towns. And if we're just playing at home, I can pull it up on my laptop. I can tell you items that are available, notable NPCs, and I can open up the book and show you a map. But if we're doing it on stream, I want to have that stuff planned. I want to show you that the stream's there and we're good to go. Have that stuff set. So giving people that agency to direct where their characters, where the adventure is going, but I have to plan it out ahead of time. So that was in the last Stolen Souls game where we ended it on the death roads and the players had a choice. Do you want to go towards the Knoll part of the adventure, or do you want to go towards the Black Mirror or the Shadow Mirror? And this way, like, I'm not railroading them into one or the other. They have that player agency. They're the masters of their own destiny. But next time we stream, the maps are there and I'm not going to look like a jackass.
Did you originally, because the Sandpoint campaign, you introduced this story of a character who was pregnant with a child, did you even have an inkling that that would be the main character of a campaign 5 years later? That unborn child.
No, and I think that's cool. However, I had kind of hoped that when Sandpoint was done, so originally Sandpoint I was only going to go to level 12. And then have those characters retire and start some type of generational one, whether it be people from the same town, people that were kids. However, the game ended at 15 or 16. Things kind of got extended, which was fine.
16. Yeah, ended at 16. Yeah.
Let everyone play a little bit more powerful, feel like, well, in one case is like a character literally ended the campaign as a deity. Another character, like I think level 12 wasn't a good point to give everyone closure,
Yeah.
but level 16 was closure. One person got to run off with the love of their life that their character had a crush on at level 1. Another person was on the way to kind of being the champion of a part of Virizia and being really close, and finally in the last or 2 games ago with Maractus, got to finalize being, I am a champion of this entity that I researched and found out, and get to bring their name back into Galarian. Talon got to live his life with his daughter.
And become accepted by the elves.
And become accepted by the elves. Like everybody kind of had their happy ever after, which was good. So yeah, I think being on stream kind of helped tell that story. Because I felt like I wanted to give people watching that closure and make it a little bit more grandiose than I would have just in a home game, but I think it still probably would have extended as a home game.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it worked out well. As a GM from a standpoint, I don't think I would have changed anything, especially with the ending, because it felt like people got to experience and got to do what they wanted to do.
It's funny because the Stolen Souls campaign, many of us on the inside, it's for those of us from the Sandpoint game, we don't like, we call it the Stolen Souls campaign, but a lot of us call it the Saya game. And the reason being is because, again, unborn child in the Sandpoint campaign that wasn't really intended. Like, I'm pretty sure we were supposed to do something else, and Cleo, Curly Girl's character, made a decision you didn't expect her to make. And, you know, that came back to bite pretty much everyone in the ass, but that was the creation of how Saya was born.
Mm-hmm.
And then that spawned this whole, well, now how do we have to deal with her aging and growing up and dealing with all of this, you know, stuff and being raised by the community and the gamers? It seemed to me like that wasn't intended, but I think that unexpected turn created those last 5-10 levels of that campaign, because they were all focused on her.
100%. I mean, and that's the big thing of giving, I mean, that idea of giving the players agency to expand and do as what they want. And I think that ties in, and I mean, just me as, like, I call it like a GM crutch. I run everything. Like, I think I only have one game that I'm running that's not in the same world, because it helps me. It's like a crutch. I only have to remember one timeline. I only have to remember one set of characters, because when people go to Carrion Hill, they know they can hire mercenaries from Riley. They know that there's a gnome that runs a tattoo shop that can do craft magic tattoos because it's one of Penrod's followers. They can make their way to Osiria, and if they search hard enough in the desert, they can find Penrod's magic school. They can visit Thrushmoor and see Mordok's meadery. They can go up to the border between well, it's now the land of the Thunderborn. It's not even the land of the Mammoth Lords anymore. And they can learn from the Shaman Balder and drink at the mead hall of Chieftain Frigga. And I like that idea of having characters in other games being able to go visit these people, especially looking at it in the Pathfinder world, which is really what, like, I'm just going to run now. I probably will never run a 5e game. Call of Cthulhu maybe one day, but I'm having way more fun helping Rachel come up ways to unfortunately kill my character, which is terrible. But like the big thing with Pathfinder is
And by the way,
at
shout out
level
to Rachel for running Call of Cthulhu. I
yeah,
didn't like she's only run a couple games, and I was really torn on whether or not having her on, but she does run Call of Cthulhu here on stream. So shout out to Rachel. Thank you for running Call of Cthulhu, and hopefully we can get a lot more of those as well
definitely.
because she does an awesome job with those.
I'll say that
Yeah,
they're a joy.
having
They're a joy to watch. Like the few times I've caught them have been just wonderful. So
it's a great
she's very
terrible setting.
very good at that.
But the idea of Pathfinder level 11 legend lore works to find you unless you've done extreme things to keep who you are hidden. So having these legendary characters at this point grow up and have communities, religions, organizations that follow them, I think is a cool thing to throw in any other world or games set in the world. So I'm also as a GM really glad that all of you kind of went along on the train to have all of the games interconnected because that lets people do things like visit Maractus's magic shop and have him make gear for them or find those binds from multiple different games like Baldur the shaman and Maractus the wizard like becoming allies, and if I couldn't combine the games that would have never happened.
And it's also for someone like me who when I have a hard time sometimes with characters or like when things come in and a character kind of loses focus or isn't, I come in and it's like, okay, I can't really play my first character in this world kind of was a bard because my archer was dead and Sandpoint was its own thing. And my bard was pretty much useless in the game because individually, if like a smaller group of us weren't there, but once the whole Shadow Lodge group came together, he was genuinely useless because everybody had him covered way better than anything he could do, even as a support character. And so being able to go, okay, well, I can step in and play this other character from this other game. Or right now, I'm just having a blast being able to just hop around with Maractus and just hop in and just be that wizard, that shows up and helps and does something, not a lot, might not do a lot of damage, but might do one little thing that might be kind of cool and might
I need to
earn him his
talk about
name.
that. I need to talk about that, but I have to step away and make sure that my kid gets home. So I'll be back in a second, but I have to talk about that one little thing that Maractus did that fucked up my whole day. I'll be right back.
But just for someone like me to have a unified world like that, to be able to go, I can switch characters from this other thing that isn't there, because Sandpoint is over with, and I can go, I can play this character, and this character means a lot to me, and I don't want him to necessarily be gone, but I don't really need him to have his own major story plot either. I can just kind of be that wandering, I don't want to say Elminster because he's not, but be that kind of wandering, step in and help where he can and still be who he is, and not be a major player but not have like his own super major storyline going on. Has been really nice for me, especially for if we do a stream, but even when we don't, it's a character that I really love playing, and I don't have to have this Loom and Doom storyline hanging over his head necessarily. I can hang out and help everybody else with their Loom and Doom storylines.
That's something of like to be said about the high level spellcasters and how they always fuck everything up. It's Rachel playing Arabella and saying, I'm gonna pilfering hand the Horn Devil's chain. It's Matthew playing the angel and me building a 20th level 10 tiers of mythic rogue based on fear and going, I'm gonna use my first level remove fear on everybody. It's Bear. it's Maractus using that one little spell and fucking up Adam's whole day.
So I think it's hilarious being like the pre-made angel out of the book, just sitting. So I got a message from Andrew going, Matt, there's an NPC that's going to show up in this adventure, and I can't run any more NPCs. Can you help me? And I'm like, cool, because I've been helping him like create some of these baddies and do other things. So I come in, not realizing that these baddies I've spent a couple of months helping him make are going to be in this freaking adventure.
Yeah, you have to fight
and
your
they're
own bad guys.
absolutely terrifying.
Andrew,
And
did
I
you
don't-
tell him? Did you tell him at all that that he was gonna have to fight his own characters?
Well, I used Matt as a sounding board for a lot
Yeah.
of these characters.
Yeah.
And so this iteration, the cycle of building these characters, he's been very present for. But ultimately building them, I built them, but I never told him that.
And I don't know their names. He goes, I want to make a rogue that's really good at intimidating people. And I'm like, cool. And I'm like, oh, here's different things we can do. And here's how some feats and some rogue skill unlocks work. And I don't know their names. I don't know what they look like. I don't know what their race are. And then we're playing this game. And then he does the combo. And I'm like, oh, this is terrible. But the whole idea of like one spell, especially at high level, and that's where, like, I've had GMs before that straight up say, hey, we're going to do a game, we're going to start at level 3 and I'm going to end it at level 12 because I don't want to deal with high level magic, or I don't want to deal with a 2-weapon fighter rogue with 7 attacks around, things like that. And so I'm enjoying, now that we're getting to high level, of having things like Andrew planned out this huge dungeon, and I'm playing this little angel, and what stands out in my mind is my angel going, Mythic Earthquake, and Andrew just goes, and he's like, I have to change this whole map.
Yeah,
And
it's
knowing
me
that-
sighing and watching that 4 rooms just opened up from 1. Okay, we'll pick this up next game.
Yeah, like, we can't do anything now because now all the dynamic lighting is
Oh, it's almost
defunct.
10 o'clock. Well, we'll see what happens next game.
Yeah. It's almost 10 o'clock. It's 8:45. Shut up. It's almost 10 o'clock.
We just started.
Spring forward, not fall back.
So Andrew, Bear, what was your...
Okay, so with the United Galarian game, I ran the last arc. And I did some great. I thought it was great.
This is
y'all
off
can
stream
have
for
other
everyone
opinions.
who doesn't.
This is
who's watching.
this was off stream, but I basically opened it up to everybody in the United Galarian game, which there's 13 people that could have potentially showed up at any given point. I basically said, if you can show up to a particular game, great. I have a methodology of keeping, like, if you can't show up from game to game, that's fine. I have a methodology of making that work. And I got to play around with some time fuckery, which was great. So in this last thing, I was running the last book in the Shattered Star thing, and I realized at one point that our PCs were way too powerful for this to be a normal dungeon crawl. Despite the fact that they were lower level than is required for this particular thing. Some of it was the number of people who showed up to the game, and some of it was the fact that we had 4 and 5 mythic tiers.
Yeah, the AP's made for 4 people, and I think at our biggest we had 9.
At 9 at what the last game we played, we had 9. So
Yeah.
I drastically changed how the game ended. I fully went off a book because that's where I live. Like, I don't really run modules all that well. I actually really struggle with modules, and that's largely to do with
Same here.
my vision and my comprehension. Like, I have a really hard time visualizing mechanics and scenarios off the written word in real time. So when I come up with it myself, it's a lot easier for me to deal with.
Yeah, I just suck at running modules in general. Has nothing. I don't have any excuses. I just suck. So
There. So I'm like, okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this bad guy that they have already in the game, and I'm going to make it a multi-tiered fight. Like Final Fantasy, like, you've defeated this form of mine, but now you must defeat this greater form of mine.
If Brian's in the chat, this is vampire, werewolf, cyborg Manuel Noriega.
Yeah, exactly. And that is a story for another time, probably when Brian's on the stream, because he tells it better than I do.
Yeah.
But I'm like, okay, so this is great. I have this great thing laid out. I have all the stuff ready to go. We ran the first leg of the combat where I was just throwing bad guys at them, just some of the more powerful stuff that was in the dungeon that was under the main bad guy's control, was going up against the PCs. And then we got to the midpoint of the fight. We ended for the night, and then we came back, and there were 2 other characters that joined the game, which consisted of Nick and his wife Curly Girl. So playing Maractus and her character Cleo. So I throw down this big bad, and I'm like, I'm ready to start fucking with everybody. He's got all these great powers, and the first fucking thing that Nick does is casts Feeble Mind on my goddamn bad guy.
Which wouldn't have been so bad if you didn't give me the option to channel it and make it way more powerful through the castles. You're like, the castle's amplifying their magic and making it you can't stop it. It's unstoppable. It's like, well, how do I get control of this damn castle?
Where I fucked up was I assumed that a Rune Lord would have a significantly better caster level check than fucking Mr. Cactus. And I was wrong. And it wasn't like, here's the thing. It came down to the roll. Like, Nick rolled, and he rolled really, really well, and he sank everything he could into gaining control of this tower. And this character has a really good roll, but I rolled like a 5. So Nick gets control of the tower, Maractus gets control of the tower, and then casts like a mythic Feeble Mind on my bad guy, who then is too stupid to get control of the tower back. And so I'm sitting here like, well, fuck. Like, there's some things I can do, but like this big epic moment that I had. But here's the thing. And I think this is where we can lead this into some GM advice. That moment right there was such a wonderful moment for Nick. He got to have this moment where he completely pulled the rug out from underneath the big bad, who is like this powerful Rune Lord in control of this incredibly powerful construct artifact. And he got to completely nerf my bad guy. And I could be mad about it, or I could roll with it and have fun with it. And that's what I decided to do in that moment. It was like, I could be mad about this, but why? Or I could just let Nick have this moment and keep going and see where it went from there. And it drastically changed the face of the fight, but it was so much fun to see Nick be like, I got to do this fucking cool thing.
Yeah, but let's be honest. I only tugged that carpet under your feet. It was Aubrey who pulled it out.
Yeah, no, 100%. 100%.
She's the one that's like, I get a favor from this one god that allows me to bring anyone back from the dead, no matter what, where, when, why, or how. And I had already previously explained to Adam that I also have this favor, and I was thinking of maybe bringing a dead god back to life, and that was an option. And so he knew about this wish. I was like, it's the same thing. And she's like, can I just, now that this thing's in spirit form, I want my favor to be the goddess of death takes this thing that's not supposed to be a spirit and brings it over. Ah, fuck.
Well, like, here's the thing. I let it go down to a roll. I did say roll of diplomacy, and she rolled like a 68.
Yeah.
Like, it was an insane roll.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, I gotta honor that.
Matt, I will just respond to you that when life gives you lead, make an undetectable scrying hut.
Yeah.
All right, this sounds like it's a story that needs to be explained.
Yeah. So kind of the whole idea of...
And the new drinking redeem is available, by the way, if you want to refill our glasses. I'm drinking water now.
So the idea of, as a GM, kind of rolling with your punches, I think... and the nice thing with our group is we have so many people that are GMs that player characters are able to roll with the punches of bad shit happening to them. And we can talk about Riley and the literal dino-sized pile of shit that rained on his character. But what the story will tell first is there was an adventure that I was going to run for Andrew, Rachel, and our friend Reich. And it all takes place in this dwarven complex. And Andrew had been saving Baldur's money up for levels and levels, because I think this is when you're going to finally buy your pauldrons. They're these shoulders that let him get bigger so he can do more damage when riding his Triceratops. And he had all of the money in like gold bars and gold coins.
Hold on. You heard that correctly. When riding his
A
Triceratops.
Yes.
I just want to call that out and make that clear to our listeners. This man rides a goddamn Triceratops. Anyway, continue.
He does.
And Andrew and Rachel, Baldur and Frigga, make their way into this dwarven town, and they have a chance to ally with one side or the other. And Frigga is a chieftain of a tribe, and she wants to ally with the nobles because it will help her cause if she complete her case, because she originally came down here to buy some weapons and armor for her troops because she had recently gotten leadership, but she couldn't make metal armor for her people. And they allied with the nobles, and right in the adventure, it's like that night, anyone that's allied with the nobles, all of their gold turns to lead. And Andrew had like 50,000 gold turn into 50,000 gold coins.
Well, that's not a bad thing at all.
50,000 pieces of lead.
That's less good.
And so he goes, I'm not getting rid of it. And I'm like, what? He's like, yep, I'm bringing it back home. And now it's your story.
So I was like, you're going to take all my gold. I'm going to do something with it. And so I went, and back in the village that we have, I took all those pieces of lead and built a building that was lined with lead so people could not divine through it.
Has that come to help you?
Very much so.
Oh, yeah.
All the time. Yeah.
Nice.
In fact, in the last handful of games I ran, it made it so he could see the time waves passing by from the after effects of Bear's game.
Oh.
Because it insulated him and protected him from the magic.
Well, and let's talk about that too a little bit. Like with this game, and this does, again, this kind of goes into sort of actionable GM advice. Like there was a point where so many different things were happening at the same time in the United Galarian world that we fully lost track of the continuity.
Right. And there were things like ahead of time and back. It's like, well, this took place 3 weeks ago, and then the next game, like, this takes place 4 weeks after that game, but 2 weeks before this. And we're all like, but that doesn't make sense because of this and that and that and this.
So when because Matt had asked me to run this 2 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, what wound up happened as a result of a conversation that I had with Nick, who was like, I love this game, but the lack of continuity is really kind of fucking with me. Like it's really causing me a problem with having like just a cogent line from A to B, B to C, C to D.
Yeah, that's my unique flaw. I see that. It's like no, and I shut down. And other people are like, they just roll with it, and I have a really hard time with it. That's my biggest flaw in gaming.
Honestly, if flaws to have, it's not one of the worst.
Yeah, you could fight someone in a gaming parking lot over a magical sword.
Precisely. Exactly.
Make sure you put that way in your oatmeal.
A fictional magical sword, I will add. So I'm sitting here like, okay, well, I have this opportunity to run this arc that is literally physically changing the face of Galarian. How can I make this work to my advantage? So I added a time element into the thing, because the time element had nothing to do with the original module. That was all me. And I talked to Matt about it. I'm like, can we do this? And like, can we have this weird sort of time fuckery going on? And like, there's reasons why it's happening. You guys don't know the reasons fully why it's happening yet, but there's reasons why it's happening. It's actually fully fleshed out. And it's a conversation that Matt and I have had. But basically what this does is it, after the end of this last game that we had, is it resets the continuity. So all the stuff that was weird and kind of fucked up from before, when we could, like, everything was just weird and kind of A to C, C to B, whatever. That was all just the time fuckery. And now going forward, we can have a predictable continuity.
Yeah, like
And
this happened on this date or this happened on that
part
date.
of that, yeah, and part of that it was using the tool to explain, why isn't this person here, without just saying, oh, they're here, or
Right. And so
they're doing things.
Exactly.
And kind of
And so,
bouncing.
when people couldn't show up to a game between game to game to game, I basically said time fuckery is happening. So time changes and they're back home. Like for Mordok, if they're back home in Thrushmore, and like if you watch the Old School 3 campaign, there was a little bit of that happening right there in real time. Like those PCs witnessed that happening. Well, okay, Matt's PC witnessed,
but the viewers got to witness it happening, and it was as a result of something that had nothing to do with the people in that game.
Yep.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So,
and kind of jumping off of that, using the same kind of device, but a different way of telling it in this last arc of this long running home game I have, this homebrew I have, there's people are, they miss like 4 or 5 games or whatever. There's all sorts of different people, and one person hasn't played in like a year or more.
God.
And I have to explain, well, why he's not doing ninja shit. Well, this dungeon I created is the plot device is the planes, and this place is doing something with the planes that causes irregular planar activity. So in one game, somebody all of a sudden they're gone, and they're in the first world now because of these planar glitches that are happening. It's not necessarily explaining continuity and why timeline might be messed up, but it is explaining a way this person couldn't make it to this game, but I really want to move things forward.
I think that's another thing to be said about having other GMs to lean on, especially in a game where you feel safe to give your creation, give your world over to another GM for a while. Because in this case, it's hard for Matt to keep track of 7 games and 7 worlds and 7 timelines all in the same world, right? It's hard to keep track of, all of the characters' motivations, and to be able to go, okay, I created this problem for myself. I'm not sure how to fix it. And then me being able to go, I have an idea on how to fix it, how it can make coherent sense. These are the bad guys. They're supposed to be the heroes of the world, but we don't really know. Let's make the Decemvirate the bad guys. And let's have them be the ones fucking everyone over because they have inside knowledge. So that's how this all makes sense, that they have that all this inside knowledge stuff that doesn't make any sense to have happened to us to make sense for it to happen. Or how can we make sense of this time? How can we fix this? And Adam goes, I have an idea. This is how we fix it. So being able to step back and go, here, help me with this, is a huge skill to have for any GM, to be able to to know that they have people that they can have help them in the worlds that they're all working as part of.
Everybody who's had an arc is fixing something from somewhere else. I just looked at Matt and I was like, hey, that arc that you're planning towards, I might be interested in that. Let me snatch that from you.
Yeah.
Wasn't fixing anything.
So I have a question at large. So for those of you watching, the 4 of us on stream here have a collective role playing experience of probably over 70 to 80 years. Like,
with me being way below all of that.
Well, yeah, Matt's got the most experience. Matt started before I met him, and I started in the mid 90s.
I
So you're looking
started.
at 25 years, 30 years for Matt at least. So that's
Yeah, I
that's
started at
45 just
10.
between the two of us.
I'm at 22 at this point.
At 12.
So so 45 plus 22 is 67. 12 is 79.
So yeah,
So yeah,
70,
we're
70 plus years, almost 80 years of
pushing 80 years of GMing experience. So here's my question. From your perspective, and okay, adding on to that, 70 years, almost 80 years of GMing experience, with playing experience at the very least. Not to mention some of the greatest GMs that I've ever encountered, like genuinely. And understanding that I have played with some of the more well-known GMs in the world because of various convention experiences and whatever. How, in your opinion, does one make a memorable character?
memorable character or memorable NPC, because one is as a GM and one is not as a GM.
From your perspective as a GM, how does one of your players make their character memorable?
I think that would depend on the player and what they would feel would be memorable for themselves. That's my thought.
What's memorable to you about them, though?
Oh, like what stands out?
Is that, for example, like Cleo, Curly Girl's character from our United Galarian campaign, is one of the more memorable characters for me because she decided early on that she was going to lean into this super heavy, dense creep factor that continually, and it goes, I can't say it goes against Curly Girl's like personality, because obviously it doesn't, but like the persona that she puts forward to the world, if you don't know her very well, it very much flies in the face of that. And so this deep and
Great refill,
existential,
by the way. Thank you, Bentley.
woo, thanks Bentley. This deep and existential creep factor that goes into the character that she plays of Cleo is incredibly memorable for me. So in that last game, because the Rune Lord that they were facing now was Kroon, and Kroon was a Rune Lord that you guys had faced umpteen years ago in real time, a couple of months ago in game time. But
It's like a year or two in game time.
It was
yeah,
like a couple of years in game time.
Yeah.
he legit had his shrunken head on her belt that she's carried with her since that moment. So when she realized that the BBEG was Kroon, she was like, oh, I got this.
Right.
She was like, oh, Croony baby, here's your fucking head. Like I had to roll and be like, is he shook by this? Because she's literally carrying his shrunken skull on her goddamn belt. And of course he was. Of course he was. Who wouldn't be?
Which I want to say for the record, this is probably her first ongoing character, because she's had other games, and I don't want to speak for her, but I just know because I'm married to her that there were a lot of other games where it's like one-offs, and it's happened like, this is going to be a long-term campaign, make a character. That game never happens. And so she was kind of put off by that, and she was thrown in. We wanted to play Pathfinder Society. We cheapskated her up to being our level by literally adding her to games we ran so that she could get credit, so that she could roleplay with us. So she came in with a high level character and kind of had to just step into that role with very little knowledge of it. And yet here she is, to you, one of the most memorable characters in the game, being a newer player in general with that character and overall. And then to look and see how far she's advanced with like walking into Curse of the Crimson Throne and going from the beginning of, I don't know how to talk in character, to being Naveen.
You know, I got to jump off of that
Yes.
because Nick, you just kind of gave me my answer to Bear's question, and it is, you know, the way I got there was she got thrown into this character at a high level, and Curly Girl, she does a research. When she's looking at spells, she spends a lot of time researching her spells, or like with Naveen, she made that big table and took the time to do it. And
Yeah, for all of
I
her
can also
attacks.
say it. I can also say it for Rachel too. She spends hours and hours researching spells for Arabella, and I know you looked up lots of spells or extracts for Dalibor, and all the alchemical items you created. So I can tell you how you make a memorable character as a GM. You do your homework. You put the effort into the character. You spend time on them. Put the work in. Think about the character's personality, think about the character's origin, work with your GM on the origin. Maybe if the GM's also doing their homework, they get a little background in there with you. But most importantly, you do your homework.
Yeah,
That would be how I would say you make a memorable character.
I would agree. And just looking back at Stolen Souls, Curly Girl had the easiest background. She played through it. I mean, admittedly played through it as the child and also as the mother of the child. So Curly Girl knew that was where Saya was coming from. But then I look at Andrew's character, Count Enosh. Andrew did his research. Andrew looked at what places in Galarian could he born with a curse. How will this curse affect him? How can he make the curse work with the character, still be part of noble society? And what type of class is going to make kind of offset some of these terrible, horrific deformities that his character has? And everyone in the Stolen Souls character did research like that for their characters. Like the cat's out of the bag now. As the last game, we know that Shy's brother is Asmodeus. Rachel looked through long lost lore, like the lore. This is literally 2 throwaway lines out of, I believe, like the Book of Vile Darkness, of Asmodeus killing his brother, who was the first god that was created by Pharasma, and running with that whole idea of being someone that lived in the graveyard or the boneyard, and this is why they have a Shabbat body, and all of this information. So yeah, I would back Andrew's thought 100%. Taking the time, doing the research. I mean, anyone can make, and I've done it twice, make someone that's great at picking locks, and that's what they're there for. And part of it was nobody wanted to play a lock picker. I knew PFS had traps up the wazoo, but it's the development of the character being this person. In, like, my opinion for Devlin is he can pick locks and he can notice things. But I finally feel at level 15, he's now accepted that he is a demonic creature. He was a tiefling. He's now a human with demonic aspect. But he's come to realize he doesn't need to hide. He can still be a good person, even though people would consider him a monster.
Just remind me before we end today, there's something that I need to do. So Nick, remind me before we're done, and there's something I need to do.
I'll
I
add
would
it to my list
also-
of things that I need to remember to do before we're done tonight. Which is
I would
already 2 that
also-
you guys have said to me, and I've already forgotten them. So,
Nick, I need you to remind me also that there's something I need to do.
I need to do nothing, so remind me to do nothing.
okay.
I would also like to kind of follow up with my statement that the onus also can't all be on the player. They can do their research, they can put in the work, and they can bring an amazing character into a dull, bland, featureless world and story, and it doesn't matter. The GM also needs to put the work in.
Mm-hmm.
The GM needs to make a compelling setting to play in. The GM should try to make a reason for these characters to care about the story that they're going to tell. It goes back to the agency. There's agency, and then there's a story that you want to tell, and you have to balance the two. Well, if the players care about the story on a personal level, then wild agency of people saying, "I'm the quote that Nick has, I'm going crazy."
I'm going
That
crazy.
doesn't happen.
Even though that's a reference to a GM, but
It is a reference to
It
a
is.
GM, but I think a player can do it just as much.
Yeah.
Well, and I'm going to piggyback off of everything that has been said so far and say, do the research. Hopefully, you have a GM that's willing to also do their research, but also on top of all of that, commit to the bit. Consistently play the character that you have built. And that's not well, I'm just doing what my character would do. Like that tends to be just an excuse to be an asshole.
Here it's I gotta step on that real quick. I'm gonna do what I'm just doing what my character's gonna do is the dumbest excuse in the world most of the time, because who controls that character. I always say it. I've said it to everybody that's in this chat that you can choose what your character does, and you can create the reason and the logic behind why they choose to do what they do. And if it's something that goes against their character, try and figure out, well, to go along with the GM or to go along with the story, how can I logically explain why my character would go along with that story? You don't have to, it doesn't have to be black and white. Oh, my character wouldn't do that. You could say, my character would do that under this set of circumstances if they look at it from this point of view. Then look at it from that point of view. You don't have to do it unless it's, telling a story or whatever that really does matter. But, you don't have to go against the grain only because of the excuse that's what my character would do. Sorry, I'll get off my podium. Continue.
No. It was an exceptional point to make. I think it really does factor into the conversation that we're having here. If you do the research, if you have a halfway decent GM, and you commit to the bit, that is a formula for having a memorable character. It may not happen right away. It may take time. It may take energy. It may take effort. But at the end of the day, that is the character that you're going to be talking about 20 years later.
Yeah,
Right.
and people will be at conventions and be like, "Hey, Twin Thing, will you find my core rule book?"
Did somebody do? Wait, hold on. Did somebody do that?
No, not the core rule book.
Not the core rulebook part. Notice he said just not the core rulebook part.
Well,
Yeah.
Adam
No,
was there
I
for
was-
the other part.
I was there for the other part. I could vouch for that shit. We gone to Con of the North. Andrew had committed to this character who was a vigilante character, and he went his non-vigilante persona was like this attorney at law representative of the vigilante Twin Fang. But Twin Fang was like a Christian Bale-esque, Batman fucking voice the entire time voice. And I remember we were going to the bathroom on a break during one of the big events, and Andrew and I were having a conversation. Matt might have been there too. I don't remember exactly.
I was there. Yep.
And somebody's like, "Oh, you're Twin Fang?" It was the funniest. It was the funniest fucking moment. He's like, "You're Twin Fang? Oh my god, I've heard about you." It was fucking great. So yeah, that's what I'm saying. Right there. That's what I'm saying. You commit to the bit, you sell it. If you have a halfway decent GM, it will be a memorable character.
And I think one thing that also kind of plays into having a memorable character is sometimes playing into your weaknesses. And sometimes it's not like literally like my character has a 6 strength and I'm going to play into, not being able to lift my own sword. But the idea of you don't have to be optimized to have a character that's fun and that's memorable. My favorite con story was my wife and I were at a game, and it's PFS, and how PFS is set up is they have different level breaks down, so you could have like a adventure that's set for level 4 and 5, and then 7 and 8. And then if you happen to be that in between level, you go up or down. And we were playing, it was us, another couple, and this other guy. And I'm playing, my character's all about disabling locks, and that was like, I was the best you could be at doing that for the level. My wife was playing a great healer. We had another person that was like the electric touch scimitar tiefling magus build, and another person that was like this super badass vital strike warrior, and then a person that just played a normal effing cleric. They had the life domain and the water domain. They had nothing gishy, nothing, like all of their stats were pretty standard, nothing like blown off the charts. And the final battle was this flooded room that you had to jump across these tops of these bookshelves, and the creature was an awakened octopus sorcerer that could freely move underwater and didn't have, because had a swim speed. And the GM's describing the room, and all of us are looking at each other like, oh, we're screwed. Because like the warrior can't make the jumps. If you fall into water, you're going to drown. And the person playing the completely non-optimized cleric busted out laughing so hard we had to call a break so he could compose himself. And once we got back from break, he goes, I'm a water cleric. And the GM's like, yeah. And he goes, so I have control water. I dropped the water in the flooded room down to an inch.
Oh my god.
The awakened octopus is now drowning in air.
That's
great.
amazing.
And had he been optimized, why would you ever take the water domain?
Right.
Especially if you're doing a PFS, nothing's in the water. Or if it is,
Yeah.
they're going to give you a potion of water breathing. Like, there's no reason to do it. And he played an unoptimized build. And we ended the game 90 minutes early because the octopus just drowned in air.
That's great.
That's amazing. I love that.
Yeah. Got a question in chat. How do you guys create a space for your players to explore their characters and interactions between group members? So giving time for the characters to like get to know one another or explore each other or get background stories, stuff like that. Andrew, let's give you a start at this one.
And while Andrew's doing that, I'm going to go grab my beer because drinks were submitted, whatever.
Yes.
Well, first of all, giving them the background stuff to work with. You can have them write up their backstory and what that is, but I'm really a strong proponent of the solo or 1 or 2 pre-campaign games where you're exploring, where did this person come from? What did they do? What's their family like? What's the place where they live like? What's their situation? And then letting that be letting them determine what their character's nature is, and letting that opening dialogue between you and the player, whether it's them playing through it or both of you talking in private about it, be the nurture that also molds how their character interacts with others. And then once it's time for the players to interact with each other, this is my favorite part. You just do this.
Yeah.
Yep.
No, go ahead. I'm just going to catch some Z's over here.
Carry on. I'll be over here just sleeping.
Well, because you get to see not just their interaction, but you get to see the revelation of things that not only the other characters didn't know, but sometimes the characters themselves didn't really realize either. And it adds more story to the overall thing, and it might bring out something that you as a GM can also use later down the road as a prodding point or a I don't know what the word I'm looking for, but like a way to go, okay, this is a motivation of this character that I didn't realize before. And now it's more of a critical motivation that I can use to make them think, okay, well, maybe I should make this decision, or have an idea of what kind of decisions they are going to make down the road.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think you can completely predict what their decisions are gonna be coming down the road. But one thing I tried to do in these background games was I tried to tie some point, specifically in Crimson Throne, some point of the story into everybody's background somehow.
Yeah.
And whether that was just explaining what the traits were that you took and how that is how that happened, or in the case of somebody who started later with Lilith, tying her backstory to probably the weakest area of the campaign storytelling wise
So
to
that it
make it
makes more.
stronger,
Yeah.
to make it
Yeah.
make sense. Why are they going to go all the way out here when the city is right here that they need to do all these trials and blah blah blah? And everybody is saying, well, that doesn't really make sense. Well, this person's from there and they're worried about these people and they need their help. And they're from there, so they'll probably help them.
Yeah.
They have an in.
Yeah. I also think, and the rest of you can tell me your thoughts, but I think having those moments, like you can do dungeon crawl, story, adventure, storyline, dungeon crawl, and not have any character personal interaction, telling their backstory, talking about their mom and their little brother or their whatever. But sometimes you need that. You need to have 20 minutes or a half hour of the characters just having character development with one another, or telling their own personal story, or going after their own, like in Curse of the Crimson Throne. Like, I don't think Dalibor would be the same character if he didn't have the option to talk about his plans to want to be a merchant or open up a shop or any of that kind of stuff. Like, the Dalibor would be a completely different character. The end of that battle would be completely different had that not actually been an option to develop throughout the game. Or the school for Curly Girl to be able to like have this development of this school and the character that she idolized growing up, handing over this identity to her, and having that, like, if she didn't have a chance to explore that feeling of her character to the other players or in the storyline, then that wouldn't have mattered. Nobody would have, it wouldn't have been as important. But because the characters got to talk with one another and develop that, it made it more important to the game in general overall, in my opinion.
I'm going to be back in just a sec.
Okay.
So, yeah, I agree. Having that interaction is good.
And
I
the question
think-
says they further, but as a GM, how do you encourage those interactions or stop the forward momentum of the story for long enough for those interactions to happen?
So, and I think that is a really difficult thing, and I know that sometimes I struggle with that with a streamed game versus a non-streamed, either in person or online game, because when I'm running a game, like, I have Twitch up. I'm watching the streamers. I'm watching the numbers. I can see if things start to get boring and people start to drop off, or what I can try to do to try to like keep things going, and that becomes a hard thing to do when doing a streamed game, because there are times when I would love to have players be able to do an exposition dump, but how do you it gets hard to make time to do that
Yeah,
while
you
still
you
making
can't
the
just say,
watchers.
Naveen, tell your story now.
Yeah, like
Enough,
sometimes
story time.
yeah, sometimes it has to feel like the right time, but also sometimes like it's a two-way street. Like if a player's like, hey, can you work something in so I can do X, Y, or Z? Cool. But if they want to play the quote unquote cloaked figure that's sitting at the back of the bar, they can. Because again, it's putting people in their comfortable spot, and especially newer players or players that are still a lot of times even trying to figure out what their character is and does, can change. One thing I think does help, and if you talked about this, Andrew, I was away grabbing my beer. Sorry. The idea of doing a session 0. I also love the idea of using some type of text program, like we use Google Chat. We're set up for a game where people can talk about stuff in between sessions. Also, the idea of people that want to sell things. Like, I don't know how many people want to come in and watch a 3-hour trip to the store ad in Magnamar. You know, like some of that stuff can be done off stream if it's a stream game, but if it's something that's going to happen in an in-home game, um, I kind of like having people trying to go to the store to buy stuff to see how they interact, and we'll bring that up when Adam's back, because his character and the way he treated people had a really detrimental effect on his character because of the way that he was just an absolute asshole to the merchants when getting an item bought and made for him. So like I feel like there has to be that fine line when doing a game that's streamed versus a game that's like an at-home or just, you know, virtual tabletop game.
Yeah,
Giving
it's
that time.
encouraging it is you have to, as a GM, you don't tell them,
Hmm.
okay, story time. You don't tell them, do you want to say anything to this person? You as a GM need to not necessarily plan, but just have moments where you sit back and you stop talking as a GM. That's how you encourage, if you've set the right building blocks with the nurture that you're building, that's how you encourage them talking to each other or talking to other people, is you sit back and you just say, what do you guys want to do?
Yeah.
You know that there's the ball's going to be at 10 tonight. You've got 4 hours. What do you want to do?
Hmm.
Sometimes they'll want to buy stuff, and sometimes they'll just want to go off and train and do their own thing. Sometimes they'll want to read their spell books or something, or sometimes they'll want to go and heal people. But sometimes they will talk to each other, and sometimes they'll start a meaningful dialogue. You can't force it. It just has to happen. And if you give enough open time for them just to do things, it might just happen. It can be a double-edged sword sometimes too, you know. You can end up having a very slow-paced game. I know my games are pretty slow-paced usually. You know, I try to have a lot of, well, what are you guys going to do, and sit back. But also, you know, it's a calculated risk if you want to get those characters, get all the juicy details out
Yeah.
for the people to watch on stream.
I think
I
for
think
me, there's two key pieces. And one key piece is you have to make sure to give them the time. Because if you just go from tragedy to tragedy, from, you know, combat to combat, from this is the chaos, this is the end of the world now, to this is the end of the world, they don't get that time to develop. So you have to A, give them that time, and B, you sometimes have to leverage your more experienced players to pull that out of the other players. So being
true.
like, hey, Adam, can you, we've got a couple new players in the game, you know, sometime in here I'll give, you know, if there's some downtime in between fights or whatever, do you want to initiate conversation just to like get more of a conversation between the characters going, and give everybody a feel of like, this might be a good time, people can kind of chat, get to know each other, get to know their characters, so you can lean on your more experienced players to kind of step that first foot forward and get the ball rolling on that as well. But you definitely have to give them time. You can't just, and I know we have new GMs in the chat, people who haven't GM'd a lot. We have new GMs in our group. We've just added 3 GMs to our private inner sanctum that, you know, some of them have been role playing for years, but not necessarily been GMing for a super long time. And you have to give the characters that breathing room to have the chance to do that, whether it's on stream or not. Because I personally think sometimes on stream that soap opera conversation moment is entertaining as well. So I don't know what Adam's got to say about that, or if Matt was about to say something before I jumped in.
Yeah, I don't remember now.
Oh, sorry. I wanted to piggyback off of what Andrew said before it went in one ear and out the other.
I just think with giving your characters the time to really explore and get into it. What's the phrase that we use? Choose the scenery, right? Like we'd always make fun of actors in movies who would just really get into the role and really just go over the top. But I think in a role playing situation, that's actually what you need, right? Like just really get in there, really chew the scenery and get into that mindset of the character and really just like, here's what I'm feeling, here's why it's a problem, and here's why I need it to be addressed right this fucking moment. And yeah, so that's my take on that.
Yeah, so I did remember the one thing that I was gonna say, and then maybe we take a little couple minute break afterwards. But as the idea of, especially in a long going game, giving people downtime and not just like we have a week before we go into our next dungeon, but going like we're gonna have 6 months of downtime. What are things that you want to do with that time? And then players going, oh, I want to open an alchemy shop. Okay, what are your thoughts behind it? And using narrative functions like that to help getting players to think about their characters' motivations. Because you can't just be, oh, I'm going to spend 6 months sitting in a library looking at a book. Okay, well, why do you want to do it? Oh, because I want to learn about these magics. Well, you could go train at a school. You could, to use that time and those opportunities to kind of explore, peel back those layers of the onion, I think can be a powerful narrative for, or, to move that narrative forward without role playing out 150 days.
Sure. Cool. Well, guys, we're going to take a quick break. We're going to go use the restroom and do all of that kind of stuff. If you're watching this on YouTube, you'll have just watched part 1, and part 2 will be uploaded later on down the road, but that's for YouTube, and when that happens later on down the road. So thank you guys all, and for those that are watching on the YouTube, we'll catch you on the part 2 of this episode. But for the rest of us here in the live stream, we're just going to go to break, and we will be right back. So stick around, and we'll see you in a little bit.